Hello, Dashidelek. I hope you are all doing well, keeping yourself healthy and happy. Most importantly, trying to take care of your mind, as mental health is very, very important. And all the teachings by Buddha, as we knew that all the teachings of the Buddha are meant to cultivate your mind, cultivate our mind to the positive state of mind. And as long as we can keep our mind positive, we'll be happier and healthier. So therefore, it is very good that from time to time, we try to filter our mind. Whatever thoughts arises in your mind, before acting them, expressing them through verbal or physical appearances, you should always pause there and think whether this thought, if I implement this thought or express this thought through verbal and physical form, is it good or is it bad? It is hurting someone else or not? So you should always focus on this. And this is so-called mindfulness and awareness teaching or practice. And because what we usually do is, because of being our habitual tendency, we usually become so impulsive. We think and we act without checking whether that thought will be helpful or harmful. So, as a matter of fact, that's happening. So now, by understanding the instructions from the spiritual master, we now know that we should not act whatever thoughts come into our mind. We should always keep at least time to filter and to really distinguish whether these thoughts are good or bad for oneself and others. So this is very, very important. And if you are able to do this in your day-to-day life, then you are already practicing the Dharma. Then you are already applying the medicine in order to cure yourself from the suffering of samsara, suffering of pain. So obviously, as we spoke the other day, we always take care of our body. It has become kind of our habit now, like brushing your teeth, having shower, doing laundry, and so on and so forth, taking care of this body. We have been raised in that way. We have been taught in that way. We have been instructed in like that way. We have been guided in that way. So it has now become our habit. And once it becomes our habit, it's very easy. So likewise, if you are able to, through the guidance and compassion from our root masters and spiritual masters, if we are able to make this habit of examining your mind and filtering your mind and trying to reduce all the negative and non-virtuous thought to give rise and able to filter when it arises before we express them through verbal and physical form. So once you do this 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and eventually it will become as your habit. So once it becomes your habit, it is not hard at all. So it is the matter of whether you start or not. It is the matter of whether you really focus and be serious and make them into our practice or not. So it's just that. So once you plant this seed, obviously it will flourish. So this is very important as a practitioner of the Buddha Dharma. And yesterday we talked about impermanence, meditation on impermanence, as we know that there are 4 different obstacles in our way to attain enlightenment. So we need to dispel these 4 different types of obstacles. And in order to dispel these different types of 4 obstacles, we have been fortunate enough to get instructions as antidote to dispel those 4 obstacles. And the first, as we discussed yesterday, was the antidote to the attachment of this life. So because of our attachment to this life and paying so much attention and value and focus to this life's activity, we usually do not concern for the internal value, for the internal development and progress in the path of liberation. So in order to dispel that kind of disturbance or obstacles, we have this meditation on impermanence nature. And the second kind of obstacle, as GAMPOPA mentioned in his introductory of chapter 4, is the being attached to the pleasure of samsara. And to dispel this, we have antidote known as meditation on reflecting of samsara's fault and knowing how the karma cause and effect works. And the third type of obstacle is being attached to the realizations of nirvana or peace. And that's very good, that's okay, but still that is kind of little bit of kind of inactive. It's not benefiting many beings. So therefore you need to dispel that too, and in order to dispel that kind of obstacles, then what you need is, as an antidote, is the meditation on loving kindness and compassion. So once you are able to gain loving kindness and compassion, concern for the suffering of others, then you'll be able to go beyond being attached to this nirvana or peace state of mind. Then you will be more concerned for others' well-being as well. And finally, the fourth type of obstacle is that not knowing the method how to cultivate bodhicitta. So to dispel this unfortunate state, we have the instructions on how to cultivate bodhicitta. What are those different types of bodhicitta and how one can implement or practice bodhicitta, both aspiration bodhicitta and engage bodhicitta of practice of 6 paramitas. So we have these wonderful instructions on in order to dispel all these 4 different types of obstacles on the path to liberation. So here GAMPOPA only mentioned attachment. Remember, if you recall those, being attached to this life's activity, being attached to suffering of samsara, being attached to the peace of nirvana. So he did not make any statement regarding ignorance and hatred. Usually we hear 3 different types of afflicting emotions, or sometimes known as 3 poisons or 3 defilements. But here he only mentioned attachment. And the reason behind this is, when you have attachment to something, then, as I discussed yesterday, then in order to, we'll become so protective. So we concern ourselves so much, or we concern things that we love so much. And because of that attachment, if there's someone who comes as a contradictory, or if there's arisement of contrary to that, then aversion or hatred or jealousy or pride, all this will take place. So therefore, it is the attachment actually who is the base for all these negative afflictions and emotions to give rise. But where did this attachment come from? Why we are so attached to this is through ignorance. Since we do not know the object, the nature of that object as impermanence nature, we are deluded to that reality. The reality is, as we talked yesterday on the chapter of meditation on impermanence nature, which is the antidote to being attached to this life's activity, the reality is nothing is permanent, nothing is unchanging, everything is subject to change. So once you understand this, then you say, oh, okay, then you awaken, okay, I've been so attached to this particular thing, this particular body, this particular object that I love so much, I care so much. But now I understand that the reality of that object that I'm so close to, that I'm so attached to, doesn't really exist as permanent. It changes, it will disappear. The form, for example, the very beautiful form or good form or nice form or figure that you're so attached to, when you understand, when you have these realizations of wisdom, thinking, knowing that this very form, this very particular beautified form will also change into ugliness, into weakness, all the appearances or complexions of that beautiful form will also not last forever. It will get old, it will slowly disappear, since all this form that we are so attached to are made out of so many things, so many elements and so many particles. They are not a single entity. They are all composite things. So because of that reality, when you realize this reality, or when you recognize this reality, then you can release your attachment. Then you will know that, oh, then it's not use. There's no meaning of still being attached to or remaining attached to that particular thing. Then you understand. You will have this kind of wisdom of knowing the true reality of that impermanence nature. So here we are only talking about impermanence nature, but as our practice goes more advanced, then we'll also try to understand the not only impermanence nature of phenomena, but also suffering nature of phenomena, selflessness nature of phenomena, emptiness nature of phenomena. So as we upgrade our realization or practice, then we'll be able to understand those reality as well. But for now, starting with impermanence nature of phenomena is very useful. So see, we have three different types of poisons: attachment, hatred, and ignorant. So ignorant is the root cause for attachment. And attachment is the basis for aversion and all other afflicting emotions. So ignorance, why is ignorance the root cause? Because it covers, it covers the clear awareness of our mind from seeing the true nature of impermanence, or to see how the karma, cause and effect works. So it kind of covers this because of ignorant. And as a result of that, what happens is all phenomena, particularly oneself, then we perceived as permanent, as solid, as real. And because of that, what happens is then attachment to oneself, or attachment to things that we love, it develops more attachment. Once we develop attachment to ourselves or to the things that we loved or like, then what happens if there arises a contrary, or someone blocks that, or someone steals that object away, or someone even slightly, someone makes a big what you call bad comment about this object, then your aversion give arise. You're angry, you're disturbed. All these things will take place. For example, if someone steals your belongings or things that you really value, then obviously, naturally, you get angry. Or sometimes when you're attached so much to things, and then if someone else has a better quality of object than yours, then as a result of that, what will you give rise to? You will give rise to jealousy. And because of jealousy, so you want to destroy their belongings or their fame or name. So you try to disturb them because you're jealous, or you try to attain that same position. And even though when you have obtained this position, this education, or this successful in your life, what happens sometimes is you give rise to pride. You think that you are the most important person. You think that I'm something different. So therefore, we give rise to our pride. And once you have given rise to pride, as a matter of fact, as the consequences of that, what happens is then you look down on others. You don't value their qualities. You think you are the best. So similarity, lots of things will take place when you are attached to yourself and your belongings. So what we are now trying to do is we're trying to understand or trying to cut the root cause of this suffering. And that is knowing the reality of impermanence nature. Once you know the nature of impermanence of yourself and others that you are attached to, any object, it can be any object that you are attached to, the beautiful form, color and shape, beautiful sound, beautiful smile, beautiful odor, beautiful texture, whatever it is. Usually, normally we are too attached to this external phenomena, right? So therefore, we give so much importance to those phenomena, external phenomena. So, but now, with the realization of impermanence nature, we will not be so much attached as we used to be, because we now know their nature as impermanent. Even how much you have attachment to them, they will not last forever with you. And by this realization, you'll be able to, let it go, not so attached. If it is good with you, fine. If it is not with you, you're still fine. If things break that you love so much, it breaks as a matter of impermanence nature. If it is there with you, you can still enjoy this. So you can, transform them. And with that kind of realization, what happens is it will give you less suffering, less disappointment, less jealousy, less pride, and less stinginess. Since you know the nature of impermanence, then you will not stick there so much. You will not stick with it so much. Then you will become more openness from your heart, and then you will be able to share with others. You can practice generosity from there. Okay? So all these good things will come up once you know the reality. When you are clear away, or when you awaken from this confusion or deluded state of mind, thinking that things are permanent, things are solid, things are real, things has this existing entity. So with this wisdom of this chapter 4, meditation on impermanence is very, very useful. Okay, so that was the chapter yesterday, and tonight we are going to study the next chapter, chapter 5, which is the suffering of samsara, or reflecting on suffering of samsara, or meditating on the reflections of the fall of suffering of samsara, and which is the antidote to being attached to the pleasure of samsara. Okay, before we start, let's pray ravish prayers and then generating bodhicitta. Sangye Jodan Soge Jonam Lai Jangjo Bardo Dani Gyapson Je Dagi Jinso Gebe Sonam Ge Dolai Benjere Sangye Drobara Jo Sangye Jodan Soge Jonam Lai Jangjo Bardo Dani Gyapson Je Dagi Jinso Gebe Sonam Ge Dolai Benjere Sangye Drobara Jo Sangye Jedan Soge Chonam La Changjo Bardo Dane Gyapson Che Dagi Jinso Gebe Sonam Ge Dolai Benjere Sangye Drobara Jo Semje Tamje Dewa Dan Dewe Gyodan Dembara Gyurje Donga Dan Donga Ge Gyodan Dewara Gyurje Donga Meben Dewa Damba Da Minda Wara Gyurje Ngiren Jada Ngidan Dawe Danyon Jembo La Nembara Gyurje Semje Tamje Dewa Dan Dewe Gyodan Dembara Gyurje Donga Dan Donga Ge Gyodan Dewara Gyurje Donga Meben Dewa Damba Da Minda Wara Gyurje Ngiren Jada Ngidan Dawe Danyon Jembo La Nembara Gyurje Semje Tamje Dewa Dan Dewe Gyodan Dembara Gyurje Donga Dan Donga Ge Gyodan Dewara Gyurje Donga Meben Dewa Damba Da Minda Wara Gyurje Ngiren Jada Ngidan Dawe Danyon Jembo La Nembara Gyurje Omen Chege Inge Bodana and some Zange Gwenye Ngoni Rangsim Jogrongan Sumden Zeba and Zavela Me Javla Jahan. Okay, so as Buddha taught Four Noble Truths, the first truth he taught was suffering of samsara, the truth of suffering. So here also we are trying to contemplate on the suffering of samsara. So wherever you born in this sixth realm or in this greater three worlds, that is Kama Dhatu, Rupa Dhatu and Arupa Dhatu, any of this world, wherever you are being born, you can experience suffering. That's why it's called samsara, the suffering of samsara. So we have to acknowledge this. Without knowing the suffering of samsara, we cannot develop faith and devotion to the Dharma, which lead us to free us from the suffering of samsara. Without understanding of suffering of samsara, there is no way that one can develop renunciation. Without renunciation, it is very hard to practice Dharma, because you can still think that, oh, I can enjoy samsara's pleasure, I can enjoy this life's activity. And if you have that kind of attitude, then you're not free from ignorant. You're not free from the knowing the true nature of things. So it is always better than remain in ignorant, from remaining ignorant, than to have some realization. It is always good to have realization than to remain under ignorance. So therefore, what we are now trying to do is trying to have some wisdom of knowing the nature of samsara, suffering nature of samsara. We knew the impermanence nature of samsara. Now we are trying to understand the suffering nature of samsara. So if you talk from the Kama Dhatu point of view, the desire realm, where these six realms are exist, wherever you take birth in this six different cycle of existence, there's always different suffering. For example, if you are being born as a human being, for now, what suffering we have to face is that getting old or age, sickness, and death. Those are the major sufferings of human realm. And on top of it, not getting what you wished for or wanting, and whatever you have gained as you wish, but struggling with to protect those things. So there are different types of suffering. And also another, if you want to know about the suffering of another realm, the general sufferings, if you talk about the God realm, even though they enjoy their whole life with luxurious and everything they need has been provided, is there by their karma. But at the end of their lifespan, what happens is that they will lose their light from their body. They will lose the perfume or good scent from their body. And slowly their complexion changes. Slowly they have to fall again into different realms according to their karma. And if you talk about the demigod, the suffering that they have is the suffering of having being jealous to the God realm, because God are more superior than them, and so because of that jealousy, they always fight with God, and they never win. They can never defeat God. So therefore, that's the another suffering of demigod. And human being, as we had mentioned earlier, and then the suffering of three lower realms, which GAMPOPA will later on give full details of those, but generally understanding the suffering of hungry ghosts is the starving and thirst, not having food and drink. Even they have food and drink, they cannot consume because of their karma. And animal realm, the suffering of animal realm is that it is being eaten by one another, or being stupidity and cannot express their feelings, or being enslaved by human. So these are the different types of suffering. And in the hell realm, there's a suffering of hot and cold, heat and cold. So this will be all explained by GAMPOPA in detail. But generally understanding of this is to give an idea that wherever you are being born in these 6 different realms, there is always a suffering. That is called a samsara. So what our target is to get away from this suffering of samsara and reach nirvana. So GAMPOPA starts this chapter number 5, suffering of samsara, which is the antidote to being attached to the pleasure of samsara. He again raised a question here. If someone thinks that, okay, I understand the nature of impermanence, impermanent causes death, okay, I accept that, but I don't worry so much, because if I'm dead now, I'll be reborn again as a human being or as a God being, God in God realm. So I can still enjoy the luxuries of human and God realm. So if someone thinks that, then this kind of person is known as being attached to the pleasure of samsara. They have never developed renunciation yet, and they think that they can always come back. No, don't worry. They don't worry that even they die, no problem. I can come back again in this world as a human, or I can come be born as a god in a god realm as a god and enjoy all those facilities. But then the answer is there's no guarantee that you'll be reborn as a human being or as a god. There's no guarantee. You have to own this by creating the cause of that. It is not a magical, you just wish and you be born in a human realm. No, it's not like that. You have to own the cause of that. You have to create a karma for that. That's one reason. That's why GAMPOPA will later on explain the karma cause and effect, how the karma cause and effect works, what kind of karma you create so you can be born into different realms. And the second answer for this is, even though with your karma, creation of your karma, and let's say with good karma, you are born again as a human being. That's good. But then that's not enlightenment yet. That's not liberation. Even there, you need to experience suffering. So this suffering will continue. You cannot run away from this suffering of samsara. Therefore, he wants us to know the reality of suffering of samsara. So, if you are being too attached to the pleasure of samsara, then GAMPOPA says, first of all, you have no authority to come back again as a human realm or enjoy the God as a God in God realm. You have to own the cause for that. Secondly, even you are being fortunate enough to be born as a human being, you are not free from the suffering of human being, of the old age, sickness, and death. So therefore, you should not have this kind of attachment to the pleasure of samsara, because pleasure of samsara again is not permanent, is the nature of impermanence, is the nature of change, suffering of change. This will come later on. So therefore, GAMPOPA wants to display or present this suffering of samsara through three different types of sufferings. So I'll read this first. You may think that it is fine that impermanence causes us to die because you will be reborn again, and once you are reborn, you will have an opportunity to enjoy all the glorious pleasures of the gods and human, and that will be sufficient for you. Such thinking typifies one who is attached to samsara's pleasure. So this kind of people is known as or exemplified as a one who are attached to pleasure of samsara. As the antidote to this attitude, one should meditate in the faults or the suffering of samsara. So in order to present this, GAMPOPA mentioned here three different types of suffering. And these three different types of suffering comprise this chapter of suffering of samsara. So three different types of suffering, as we are familiar with this. The first one is all pervasive suffering. That means that suffering that is spread widely within yourself, even though it is not visible, even though it is not sensible now, but it is there. Like as soon as you obtain this khandhas, form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness, you already is pervasive of suffering. You're pervaded by this. Because once you are born, definitely it's a momentary change. Born, age, sickness, death is, is kind of big highway, great highway. One must go on this. One must follow this without any choice. So this is what you call as all pervasive suffering. That's there. And then second is suffering of change, which means that on top of that, on top of all pervasive suffering, there's another suffering called suffering of change. And that is actually pleasure, but it will change into suffering. For example, temporary pleasure or happiness like youthfulness, our youth, when you are strong, when your minds are sharp, when your physical appearance are strong enough to lift anything, to go anywhere, to jump, to do anything. You have this ability. You are youthful, you are strong, and also the wealth that you have, the education that you have, the family members that you have, the name and fame that you have. All the success of this life are subject to change. That is why it is called suffering of change. It is not suffering as a sensation there. It is still pleasure, but then it is subject to change. And once you are witnessing that change, or when you encounter that change, then it will give us lots of disappointment, lots of depressed. Then this is how it is known as suffering of change. And then third type of suffering here is suffering of suffering. That means that you already have all pervasive suffering once you are being born, once you have these khandhas. On top of that, if you have, physical problem, health issue, mental problem, mental issues, then this is like double suffering, suffering of suffering. There's already one pervasive suffering as just after being born, and then on top of it, lots of difficulties, things going not according to your plan, to your plan. There are other people disturbing you. Your physical condition is not good. You have lots of pain, epidemic disease. All these things are suffering of suffering. So GAMPOPA wants to present this chapter with three different types of suffering. Okay. If these three sufferings were explained by simile or example, all pervasive suffering would be like unripe fruit. It's fruit, but it's unripe, so it's not ready to eat. Likewise, this suffering is suffering as a nature, but it's not visible yet. So you don't feel it. All pervasive suffering. The next one is suffering of change would be like eating poisonous rice. So it's a pleasure when you eat rice. It's delicious, it's yummy, or good rice, well cooked. Have some many different types of ingredients in it, like fried rice, for example. It's delicious. It's not suffering at that moment, but later on, since there's a poison in it, with it, later on, you have so many troubles, so many problems will take place. So therefore, suffering of change is similar to eating a poisonous rice. And then the third type of example for suffering of suffering would be like mold on fruit or fungi on fruit. The fruit is there, but it is what you call not the best fruit. Is if you eat this, it will be not pleasure at all. So the example here GAMPOPA gives is the suffering of suffering would be like a mold on fruit, fungi on fruit. So next explanations of suffering, if one explains these three sufferings with their definitions, then what will be the definition is the all pervasive suffering would be a neutral feeling, because all pervasive suffering you cannot feel now. That's why the feeling is neutral now. There's no happy feeling or there's no sad feeling. It's just a neutral feeling. The suffering of change would be like feeling of pleasure. Suffering of change, at present, it is pleasure, but it will change later on. And the suffering of suffering would be like feeling of suffering. Obviously, suffering of suffering is actually there's a feeling of suffering. There's a, it's very visible or sensible. Therefore, it will be like a feeling of suffering. The pleasure, the sensation is suffering itself. If the primary characteristic of these three sufferings were explained, so what are the primary characteristics of these three sufferings? Then we would see that they are pervaded by suffering the moment the afflicted skandha exists. So as I mentioned earlier, the moment we have this body, this feeling, this perception, this formation, this consciousness, you are not apart from suffering. You are within the nature of suffering. So these are the different examples that GAMPOPA mentioned here in order to understand these three different types of suffering. And the first one, all pervasive suffering. This suffering for ordinary people, it is very hard to realize this suffering. It is there, but we don't really notice this. Suffering of suffering is very easy to notice because it's painful, it's unpleasure. Suffering of change is also noticeable because it's pleasure, but we don't know it is changing. It is suffering of change. We think that is pleasure, so there's a delusion there. But all pervasive suffering, for ordinary being, it is very hard to recognize. But for the noble being, with their practice, it is very visible for them, sensible for them. They can realize this suffering of all pervasive. That's why GAMPOPA says here, ordinary people will not feel the all pervasive suffering. As for example, when one is stricken with a serious plague or the epidemic disease like cancer, and at that time, a small pain in his ear or mouth and so forth are not noticeable. It means that when you are under the pressure of suffering, then you do not notice the all pervasive suffering because of the pressure of suffering. Or when you're overwhelmed by temporary pleasure or happiness, then you do not notice this all pervasive suffering. But the noble one, or the who have the practice of or realizations of suffering, all those people, noble ones, are who are beyond samsara, such as the stream enterer and so forth, will see the all pervasive suffering as a suffering. So the example for that would be, for example, when one is nearly recovered from the epidemic disease, then small pain of his ears, for example, is noticeable. Pain of that ear infection is experienced as suffering. So this is a simile for that. So here GAMPOPA mentions that someone who are beyond samsara, who have some kind of realization, as he mentioned here, stream enterer. And what does that mean? They are, this stream enterer, there are four different progressive stages in order to attain arhat, the final realizations of Shavaka's school of Buddhist. So when Shavaka school of Buddhists, when they practice, their final goal is the attainment of arhat, which is the liberation. So in order to attain that arhatship, you need to go four different progressive stages. So this stream enterer is the first stage, which is known as Gyundu Shupa in Tibetan. Then we have this one's returner. As the practice go higher, as realization becomes more advanced, then they attain the second stage, which is known as once returner, which means that they will come back to samsara one time. Lenjik Chirgongwa in Tibetan. Then, as their practice progress, they will be able to attain non-returner. That means do not need to come back to samsara because of the force of karma. They do not need to, because they have this realization and they have eliminated and dispelled all the causes for samsara. So therefore, Chirmiyongwa in Tibetan, non-returner. And then finally, Tajomba, or the four destroyer, or who have destroyed all the negative afflictions and emotions, which is the liberation for the Shavaka school of Buddhists. So therefore, for those individuals who are practicing in these four different stages, for them, this all pervasive suffering is noticeable. But for being like us, ordinary being, the all pervasive suffering is not noticeable yet, because we are not free from suffering and not free from suffering of change. But for those individuals, as we mentioned earlier, they are free from suffering and suffering of change with their practice and realization. So that's why GAMPOPA gave this example here. There's another example. When a piece of hair is in the palm of your hand, there is no suffering or discomfort. But that very same hair goes into your eye, there is suffering and discomfort. Likewise, all pervasive suffering will not be felt as suffering by ordinary people, but will be seen as suffering by noble beings. As there's a quote from the Abhidharma, when one hair from the palm of the hand goes into the eye, there will be discomfort and suffering. The childish, like a palm of the hand, are not aware of the hair of all pervasive suffering. The saintly or the noble beings are like I and will feel the all pervasive suffering. So this is what all pervasive suffering is, with simile and who can notice this suffering and who cannot. This is the one type of suffering. The second type of suffering GAMPOPA mentioned here is the suffering of change. Again, this suffering of change is pleasure, but it's temporary pleasure, but we are confused thinking that's permanent pleasure. And the sub-object of that pleasure that we think and concern so much and value so much, that subject, that object is actually, in fact, as a nature, is an impermanence nature. But we are deluded that reality and we think that is permanent, solid and real. And because of that, we have this attachment. And once you know that these changes, these are momentary changes, then what happens is, that your earlier experience of pleasure will disappear. And this will be meant for change, suffering of change. So here, suffering of change, the second type of suffering is the suffering of change. And so it is called suffering of change because all the pleasure and happiness in samsara will eventually change into suffering. As it is mentioned in the Great Compassion Sutra, the kingdom of God is a cause of suffering. All the human king and kingdom are also a cause of suffering because they are nature of change. Since they are nature of change as impermanence nature, they are subject to change. And when they change, you suffer. You suffer because of being apart from them. You suffer because of losing them. You suffer in order to protect them, and so on and so forth. So suffering of change. Therefore, even if one gained a universal monarchy over human beings, that would eventually change to suffering. And there's also another quote from Letter to a Friend. Even if one becomes a universal monarch, one would fall into slavery in samsara. Not only that, even one who achieved the body and enjoyment of Indra, the king of God, would eventually die and fall. So suffering, there's also suffering there. Again, the letter of the friend to the friend says, even though one becomes Indra, who is prizeworthy, one will fall down to the earth by the power of karma. Not only that, one who achieved the state of Brahma and so forth, the kings of the gods who transcended the desire world and who experienced the pleasure of the meditative concentration. So those beings who are in the Rupa Dhatu, so to speak, God in form realm. Those also who have actually transcended the desire realm, but for even those individuals would eventually fall according to their karma. They are also not free from the suffering of samsara. Okay? As another quote from Letter to a Friend says, one who achieves the pleasure and happiness of Brahmahood, free from the desire world, will again become the fuel to EPC. Here EPC means the one of the hell realm, constant suffering hell. So this will come later on, and suffer continuously. So even though when you have gained the realizations of God, according to your karma, if you do not apply remedy there when you are being born as a God, usually you don't have opportunity because you are too busy consuming the facilities there. You do not have opportunity to practice dharma and gain realization, and also to develop renunciation. So you have wasted all those luxurious time consuming facilities there, and at the end of the time, after the lifespan expires there, then you regret, but that's too late. Then you will fall according to your karma into different realms. Here in this case, KHENPO mentioned here to the hell realm, which is known as constant suffering hell. So this is another explanation of suffering of change. So no matter where are you being born, there's suffering in every realm. So then what we need to look now is not being attached to the pleasure of samsara, but to focus on nirvana, to free ourselves from the existence of suffering of samsara. If you're able to gain this kind of realization, then you'll not fall under the force of suffering of samsara. Once you see and acknowledge the suffering of samsara, then what you need to do is you will get interest. You will be, diligent enough in order to free yourself from the suffering of samsara and to attain the enlightenment state of mind. Otherwise, if you do not know the reality of suffering of samsara of all different realms, then you think like earlier, as KHENPO mentioned, that you may think that, oh, it's okay, I'll die now, but I can reborn as a human being again and enjoy the luxuries there. I die now, but I can also be, I can travel to God realm and enjoy all the facilities there. So this kind of illusion has to be removed. And even though if you create good karma to be able to born as a human and in God realm, still it is not free from suffering. So therefore, that shouldn't be your final destination. Your final destination should be perfect enlightenment state of mind. So therefore, in order to gain this wisdom, in order to have that kind of enthusiastic and diligence, you need to understand the suffering of samsara. It will encourage us to the direction towards the liberation. Otherwise, we will be deluded and we will be taking migrating into different realms of samsara. And the third type of suffering here, KHENPO mentioned, is the suffering of suffering. Now, the third suffering of suffering is the appearances of all the greater sufferings in addition to the suffering which predates the moment we have these afflicted skandhas. In other words, suffering of suffering means suffering of kind of greater suffering in addition to the all pervasive suffering. On top of all pervasive suffering, we have much greater suffering, and that is known as suffering of suffering. So to illustrate this, to present this, KHENPO mentions the different types of suffering in different realms. So here he says, within this category, one should understand two types of suffering. Suffering of the lower realms, that is known as the hell realm, hungry ghost realm, and animal realm. Those are categorized as a lower realm. And the suffering of higher realms. Higher realm, you should understand those three different higher realms: human realm, demigod realm, and God realm. So this, in order to understand the suffering of suffering, KHENPO divides this into two. One, to understand the suffering of lower realms, and second part is to try to understand the suffering of higher realms. So even though it is called higher realms, obviously it is better than lower realm. It has more opportunities to practice Dharma. It has less suffering compared with lower realms, but still it is nature of suffering. It is not free from suffering at all. So therefore, we should understand this in very detail. That's why KHENPO focus the different sufferings of different realms what are the sufferings in each different realms, which is which if he shared this with us, obviously it is not pleasant to hear the suffering all the time, and especially in this case, the suffering of lower realm, and especially in the matter of hell realm. There are many different types of sufferings here that he mentions. It is not pleasant to hear this, but it has the meaning. Then what happens if you really concern and really try to understand all this suffering of these different realms, then what happens? Then you can develop loving kindness and compassion. Then you will have an opportunity to develop concern for these beings. This is one beneficial effect of understanding the suffering of samsara. Second beneficial effect of understanding of suffering of samsara is then you will not attach so much to the pleasure of samsara, because then now you know this pleasure of samsara are temporary, they are not permanent, and the object where we witness the pleasure, good food, good clothing, good shelter, all these also are no other than the impermanence nature, matter of change. So when you know this, then you do not want to attach to the pleasure of samsara. And these are the beneficial effects of knowing the suffering of samsara. One, it will give you an opportunity to develop concern and compassion towards those individuals, those beings who are suffering a lot in lower realms or even in higher realms. Second, wisdom of knowing the suffering nature of samsara or impermanence nature of samsara. Therefore, it will divert your wish towards nirvana. Oh, even I reborn as human being, even I reborn as a God in God realm, it is still not free from suffering of samsara. They also experience different types of suffering. So therefore, I should not delude myself from being attached to the pleasure of samsara. I have to go further beyond this samsara in order to realize perfect awakening state of mind. So these are the different types of beneficial effects of understanding the suffering of samsara. So you should not ignore this, but you should try to understand this. And you should not, this message here, the instruction here that GAMPOPA shares with us about the suffering of samsara, especially the lower realms, is not to terrify us, is to give an opportunity to us to really understand and have compassion towards those individuals, and also to awaken ourselves from this delusion state of mind. So these are the few reasons why GAMPOPA mentioned about the suffering of lower realms and higher realms. Okay, so having said that, we'll conclude here for tonight, and we'll try to understand suffering of 6 realms in more detail tomorrow. So before we conclude, let us pray together and dedicate this good merit for the benefit of all sentient beings. So nam de ye tam je se ba nye top ne nye be da nam pam je ne ge ga na je ba la do ba ye se be so le do wa ra sho.
touch delay. Now we do recite mantras. First, you take refuge and generate bodhicitta. Therefore, you visualize that in front of you, your guru, and surrounded by Buddhas, Dharma, and Sanghas. Then, with your faith, you take refuge in generating bodhicitta prayers. You repeat 3 times. Oi sanje je dang hai so gi jo na lai jan cho ye ba do da ne ja so je da ge jin so je be se na ge dro lai ben je san je do bra jo san je je dan zo ge jo nam la jan jo bra do da ne ja so je da ge jin so je be se na ge do la ben je san je do bra jo san je je dan zo ge jo nam lai jan jo bra do da ne ja so je da ge jin so je be se nam ge dro la ben je san je to bra jo Sem je dam je de wa dan de we jo dan de bra jo ji do nga dang do nga la ge jo dan da la wa jo ji do nga la me be de wa dam ba dan me da la wa jo ye ren cha dan ye dan da ve dan nyam chen bo la ne pra ju ro ji sem je dan je de wa dan de ve ju dan de pra ju ro ji do nga dan do nga ge jo dan da la wa jo ji do nga lai me ben de wa dan ba dan me da wa jo ji nie ren ja dan nie dan da ve dan nyam chen bo la ne ba jo ye sem je tam je de wa dan de we jo dan de ba jo ji do nga dan do nga la ge jo dan da wa jo ji do nga lai me be de wa dan ba dan me da la wa jo ji nie ren cha dan ye dan da la ve dan nyam chen bo la ne pra jo ji Now meditate on giving and taking. In Tibetan we call Tong Len. Tong means give, Len means take. Give means what do we give? Give that our happiness, our merit, and cause of the merit, cause of the happiness is love and compassion. And take means you're taking all the beings, their pain, their suffering, and the cause of the sufferings, other ignorance, attachments, angers. We do this meditation to help us to develop our bodhicitta, develop loving kindness and compassion. And this meditation apply with your breathing. Your breathe out is giving. You breathe in is attacking. First you breathe in, then you visualize the mother sentient beings. They are in suffering and this samsara. Then we breathe in, then their sufferings, their pain, and the cause of the suffering is attachment, anger, ignorance, and they all come out from their body, the form of black smoke, black color smoke. You breathe in together, or you breathe in with your breathing. You imagine they are free from the suffering and the cause of suffering. This breathing in and go into your inside your body. That time you imagine that inside your body, that the heart level, there are small fire. This fire will burn off all the beings are suffering and pain and cause of the suffering, all burn, then just disappear. Now you breathe out. That time you visualize that from your body come out white color smoke, come out with the breathing, and this go to all over the place and dissolve into all the mother sentient beings. You visualize they receive your love, compassion, and virtues, merits, happiness they receive. Imagine they are forever staying with the happiness and the cause of happiness. Now we recite Avalokiteshvara's mantra. The Avalokiteshvara's mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum is an essence of all the prayers, the essence of all the dharmas. Therefore, we have to visualize that instantly transform yourself and all the mother sentient beings are forearm generated. And your place is pure land of the Avalokiteshvara. Then now you follow my instruction that you would try to visualize that yourself as Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara is a Sambhogakaya form Bodhisattva. His form is a Sambhogakaya form, means you have wearing ornaments, and therefore your body is white in color, one face, 4 hands. You are sitting on lotus and moon cushion. Then you are very youthful and very handsome, like 16 years old. Then your body is not solid, it's transparent. Then first 2 hands join together at the heart level, and the second right hand is holding the crystal mala, and the second left hand holding the lotus flower. Then your Sambhogakaya form that you have a jewel crown under your head, and earrings, and 3 layers of necklace, arm bangle, hand bangles. Then you are at the wrist, you have a jewel belt, and lower part of your body wearing colorful long skirt, and upper body you are wearing colorful shirts. Then especially you are carrying one deer skin at your left shoulder. Then now you imagine that all the beings are the same as you. Then everyone is from Genesis, form our Genesis form, our Avalokiteshvara's form. Then your speech is just chanting the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Then your mind is love and compassion. Then all your chanting mantra, all the beings are together, you are chanting the mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme mani be me omoy mani be me omoy mani be me Mani be me, 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 O 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 mani be me. O mani be me, 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 o mani be me. Now you recite long life Buddha's mantra, Buddha Amitayus mantra. Therefore, you visualize that above your head, that Buddha Amitayu is sitting on lotus and moon cushion. The Buddha Amitayu is red in color, also in Sambhogakaya form. He is two hand is a meditation posture and holding long life vase. Then from your heart, radiate light. This light go and dissolve into the Amitayu's heart. They request Amitayu to give us a blessing for our long life, prosperity. Then Amitayu's body radiate light. Light go to 10 directions. Then this light collect all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas blessings and collect essence of energy of universe and also collect the essence of the 5 elements and all come and dissolve into his this long life vase, the long life vase full of the nectar and overflow from the vase. The nectar come to your crown and go into your body. They purify all the obscurations or the obstacles for the long life. Then nectar fill up your body. Then you imagine that you have received the blessings of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, then energy of the universe and the essence of the 5 elements. Then your body is radiate light. more energetic and brighten your life. So you concentrate on this visualization, then recite mantra with faith to the Buddha Amitayu. Om Namo Bhagavate Aparimita Ayurjana Subhidhitate Sorajaya Tatagataya Arhate Samya Sambuddhaya Te Yata Om Pune Pune Mahapune Aparimita Pune Aparimita Pune Jana Sambaro Patite Om Sarva Samkara Parishuddhe Dharmate Gagana Samungate Sobhava Vishuddhe Mahanaya Parivare Soha Om Namo Bhagavate Aparimita Ayujana Subhinitate Sorajaya Tatagataya Arahate Samya Sambuddhaya Te Yata Om Pune Pune Mahapune Aparimita Pune Aparimita Pune Jana Sambaro Patite Om Sarva Samkara Parishuddhe Dharmate Gagana Samungate Sobhava Vishuddhe Mahanaya Parivare Soha Om Namo Bhagavate Aparimita Ayojana Subhidhitate Zorajaya Tatagataya Arahate Samya Sambuddhaya Te Yata Om Pune Pune Aparimita Pune Aparimita Pune Jana Sambaro Patite Om Sarva Samkara Parishuddhe Dharmate Gagana Samungate Sobhava Vishuddhe Mahanaya Parivare Soha Om Namo Bhagavate Aparimita Ayurjana Mahabune aparimita pune aparimita pune jana sambaro bachite Sarava samkara parishuddhi dharamate gagana samungate sobhava vishuddhi mahanaya parivare soga namo bhagavate aparimita ayurjana subhene cita tejorajaya tathagataya arahate samya sambuddhaya teyata pune pune mahapune aparimita pune aparimita pune jana sambaro bachite Sarava samkara parishuddhi dharmate gagana samungate sobhava vishuddhi mahanaya parivare soha. Recite the Medicine Buddha's mantra. Therefore, you visualize from your heart radiate light. This light go to the Medicine Buddha's pure land. Then the light dissolve into Medicine Buddha's heart and request that Medicine Buddha to give us the blessings. Then through his love and compassion, that nectar flow from his avenging bowl. The nectar come and go into your crown, into body. They purify all the obscurations, all the sickness. The nectar fill up your body. Then imagine that you have received the Medicine Buddha's body, speech, mind, blessings. They will recite the long mantra 7 times and the short mantra 7 times. The mind is concentrated on the visualization. Om Namo Bhagavate Bhekate Guru Bedruya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samya Sambuddhaya Teyata Bhekate Mahadekaje Raja Sambodaya Deyata Bekanje Bekanje Maharanjaya Samongate Sobhava Soha Namo Bhagavate Bekanje Guru Bendroya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samya Sambodhaya Teyata Bekanje Bekanje Maha Bekanje Raja Samongate Soha Namo Bhagavate Bekanje Guru Bendroya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samya Sambodhaya Teyata Bekanje Bekanje Maha Bekanje Raja Samongate Soha Namo Bhagavate Bekanje Guru Bendroya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samya Sambodhaya Eyata Bekanje Bekanje Maha Bekanje Raja Samongate Soha. Short mantra. Eyata Bekanje Bekanje Maha Bekanje Raja Samongate Soha Eyata Bekanje Bekanje Maha Bekanje Raja Samongate Soha Eyata Bekanje Bekanje Maha Bekanje Raja Samongate Soha Deyata 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 Bekanje Bekanje Maha Bekanje Raja Samongate Soha. Now we recite Padma Shavari mantra, that you visualize the Padma Shavari deities in front of you. The Padma Shavari is one of the emanation of the Tara. Then we recite the mantra that visualize that nectar flow from her body. So nectar come to into your crown and fill up your body. The nectar will purify all the obscuration, then all the sickness. Om Pishati Prarna Shavari Sarvan Chora Prashamani Soha Om Pishati Prarna Shavari Sarvan Chora Prashamani Swaha Om Pishati Prarna Shavari Sarvan Chora Prashamani จิปานาชาวาริสราวันโจลาปราชามานิโสหะอมปิชาจิปารนาชาวาริสราวันโจราปราชามานิโสหะอมปิชาจิปารนาชาวาริสราวันโจลาปราชามานิโสหะอมปิชาจิปารนาชาวาริสราวันโจลาปราชามานิโสหะ Now this Dorje Namjum. So you visualize that Namjum deity is in front of you. Then nectar flow from his body, go into your body and purify all your obscurations and all your sickness and all your bad energy. Nama Chandra Benza Krodha Holo Tista Tikta Benda Benda Hana Hana Amrite Pumpe Om Nama Chandra Benza Krodha Holo Tikta Tiksta Banda Banda Hana Hana Amrite Humpe Nama Chinda Benza Kroda Hullo Tiksta Tikta Banda Banda Hana Hana Amrite Humpe Amma Chinda Benza Kroda Holo Tikta Tikta Banda Banda Hana Hana Amrite Humpe Nama Chinda Benza Kroda Holo Tikta Tikta Banda Banda Hana Hana Amrite Humpe Nama Chinda Benza Kroda Holo Tikta Tikta Benda Benda Hana Hana Amrite Humpe Nama Chinda Benza Kroda Holo Tikta Tikta Banda Banda Hana Hana Amrite Humpe. Now you visualize magic deities in front of you. The nectar flow from his body and come into your body. Purify all the obscurations, all the sickness, all the bad energy, negative energy are purified. Om Burkum Maha Brahmanaye Puti Puti Bimale Utsuma Kroda Humpe Om Burkum Maha Brahmanaye Puti Puti Bimale Utsuma Kroda Humpe Om Brokum visualize that in front of you is the sky, that 8 medicine Buddha, and surrounded by 16 bodhisattvas and all the medicine deities are countless of them in front of you in the sky. Then with your faith, they request to give us the blessings. Raja Samungate Sowa Senje Nebai Jinyeba Nyurdo Nele Tarjurich Jovi Nene Maleba Tato Jua Me Pararishu Semje Yemin Devene Nange Jigde Khan So Jung Warahama Juruji Jetara Sheme Chebe Se Jashi Keje Lai Le Somande Jebe Soto Nege Dongare Jigden Kham So Chung Wararai Mai Juruji Chida Shenje Kai Nai Che Bai Tara Nege Mi Tamai Te Be Dai Jebe Ninje Bai Da Dai Be Rin So Ge Li Je Gen La Ne Bai Mai Juru Ji Ne Be Ge Re Don Dai Je Jo Da Laboro Ye Do Som Jai Do Jo Da Shi Jia Zai Shi Ne Lai So Ba Yin Li Jin Gen Lai Ce Warai Man Juru Ji Listen Deva My little Jibi Junshi to Bendo Ngai Jiniba Mali Shi Dan to de Bai Dan Serene Mende Jide Braraisho Lama Concho Sumonge to Jedan Kando Che Chong So Mene to Dan Lende Lo Wa Me Bende Do Ji Mo Wa Me Lama Ta Ifte Do Pararaisho. Repeat page 4. Le dan lo baro gen le juro ba yi den dan ne dan jong bo se wa so sen je ye me de ve ne na ge jide kan so jun warai mai juro ji Jitara Sheme Chebe Se Jashin Kiji La Semende Jebe Soto Nege Do Jigde kam so jun wara ma juroroji chida shinje kai na je ba tarar nige mi zaman te be da je be Nian Jie Bai Da Dai Bi Ren Lai So Li Jie Gen Lai Ni Pra Lai Mai Ju Ru Ru Ri Ji Ne Be Ge Re Don Tai Jie Ju Dang Loboro yendo sun jai do jodan shi ja za shi ne la so ba yi li je gen la ce hwa ra ma ju ji Listen dewa my little jibe junshi to be do ngalai shi ni ba ma le she shi dan to ba de ba dan Tirine mende jide bararajo lama konjo sumange to jidan khando che jon so me do da Lende lo wa me be den do ji ngo wa mo la man ta se do ba jo. Repeat page 4. Le da lo bro ye le juro ba ye den da ne da jo bo se wa so sem je ye me de ve ne na ma ge Jide kan so jo warare ma juro ji Jitara she me te be se jai shi ke je la le semen Soto nege do ngalai je ni ba ji de kam so jong wara mai ju ji che da shin je kai nai che ba tra Nige mi zaman te be ta ji be ni je ba 남시 제비 주마 달 대와 젠도 지주지 제네 베메 가제데 르덴데라 산제쇼 장초이 톰네 지세 도이 투베 투와 젠바라레쇼. Now dedicate the merits that from beginning is until now, whatever we have accumulated merits and virtues, we share with all the mother sentient beings. By these merits, all sentient beings free from the sufferings and obtain enlightenment. Nam de time Jesus by Tom ne be namai banjin ke ganai je ba la Sibe chole do wa are sho. Thank you.